Hello friends, I am Arpit and I am here with today's analysis. Today is 21st of December and we are going to deal with two very important topics which are in news. The Telecommunications Bill 2023. This bill has been tabled in the Lok Sabha, passed by it in the ongoing winter session, yet to be tabled in the Rajya Sabha. The need for bringing this bill was the changing nature and technological advancements in the telecommunication domain. Telecommunication is very much important from socio-economic development point of view as well as security point of view of the country. Hence, there are provisions with respect to spectrum allocation or ease of licensing, or you can say granting excessive surveillance powers to the government to ensure security of the country, which obviously are some critical points in this bill. So let's see how does this bill gets passed in the Rajya Sabha. The second topic which we are going to discuss is causes of inflation in India. Whether inflation in India is due to the supply side or the demand side. Inflation generally happens due to mismatch of supply and demand. Now, when I say mismatch, supply, if it is more as compared to demand, the prices will fall. If supply is less and demand is high, prices will go up. There has to be a balance between supply and demand to keep the prices stable. Well, according to the RBI report, in India, 55% of the contribution to inflation, that is CPI based inflation, is due to the demand side. And, it has shown through its various graphs and figures that how this inflation is there in India from 2019 till 2023. So let's get started with the first topic. The Telecommunications Bill 2023. It was introduced in the Lok Sabha in the ongoing winter session only, and it has now been passed, introduced on December 18, now passed. No, there are very less members of the opposition in the Lok Sabha. Many of them have been suspended. So it was passed without much debate and deliberation on that bill. Concerned Ministry of Communications and Information Technology. The bill seeks to replace 3 laws. Out of 3, 2 are British era laws. First is the Indian Telegraph Act of 1885. Second is Indian Wireless Telegraphy Act of 1933, and the third is the Telegraph Wires Unlawful Possession Act of 1950. So, out of these 3, the first 2, that is the Indian Telegraph Act and the Indian Wireless Telegraphy Act, are pre-independence laws. So, these all 3 will be replaced by this Telecommunications Act 2023 if it gets passed by the Rajya Sabha and the President gives her assent to the bill. Now, the statement of objectives and reason. Now, every bill, every law actually has this statement of objectives and reason. The statement of objectives and reason clearly highlight the intentions of the lawmakers, that why they want to bring this bill. What is the reason behind bringing this bill? And with respect to this bill, the Telecommunications Bill, the reason was clear. We need to understand one thing with respect to telecommunications. Telecommunications, in a layman term, if you have to understand what are telecommunications, it is communications happening over a network. So, communications happening over a network. Just a layman understanding of telecommunication. We will come to the exact definition of telecommunication which has been defined in the law. But yes, as of now, we need to understand it in this way. So, telecommunication is a very, very important, I would say, domain in the overall socio-economic development of any country in the present day world. Telecommunication is also very important when it comes to security of any country. Now, let's not forget, during 2611, satellite phones were being used by Ajmal Kasab and company. Now these satellite phones, they were communicating using these satellite phones. A classic example of telecommunications. However, this kind of telecommunications can be considered as advanced telecommunication. So definitely telecommunication domain is also, I would say, one of the major aspects of ensuring safety and security of the country. And telecommunications domain has evolved rapidly, especially if I talk about the last decade or so. So there was a need to revamp the old laws. Three laws, out of which two were pre-independence and just one was just after the independence passed in 1950, which we saw, the three laws. Obviously, those laws did not entail provisions with respect to the present day scenario of telecommunications. And those, I would say, this thing became the reason for bringing in a new law. Telecommunication sector is a key driver for economic and social development of the country. Security of our country is also dependent upon telecommunications. Therefore, there is a need to create a legal and regulatory framework that focuses on safe and secure telecommunication network that provides for digitally inclusive growth. We have to ensure digitally inclusive growth because this telecommunication domain is very, very important in the socio-economic development of the country. Simultaneously, we have to ensure safety and security. So, to ensure safety and security, the government has given itself certain surveillance powers which are considered to be overarching or authoritarian by certain critiques of the government as well as this bill. So, we will see, those things which have become contentious. Now, provisions, one by one we'll go. Simplifying licensing. Now, currently, the telecom department had more than 100 types of licenses or approvals which any operator, if it had to operate, they had to take this much approvals. But now this bill has simplified to just one approval. Obviously, behind those one approval, there are many steps. But yes, licensing has been simplified with this bill. This will usher in, I would say, investment in this particular domain. Then allocation of spectrum for satellite communication specifically they've talked about. Now generally in 2012 there was this 2G spectrum case. The Supreme Court clearly said that the UPA government at that time allocated spectrum on its whims and fancies. The way it wanted to allocate, it allocated. Because at that time, administrative allocation was done of the spectrums. And after that, this process of bidding came. There was this bidding which had to happen, and the highest bidders would get or would be allocated the spectrum. The administrative allocation was done away with. But here in this particular bill, specifically with respect to satellite communication, auctions will continue to be there. It will be continued to be the preferred norm of assigning spectrum to entities. However, administrative allocation has been again reintroduced over here, which will be done for sectors like metro rails, community radio, defense, railways and police, among others. So these are some key sectors. For these sectors, if spectrum has to be allocated, there is no need for doing, this thing, auctioning. You can directly, the government has been empowered. You have administrative powers to allocate the spectrum to these domains. They don't need to participate in the, allocation or that auctioning process. So it is like this. Next is unutilized spectrum. The bill also talks about unutilized spectrum. Let's suppose I am a telecom operator and I purchased some spectrum but I have not utilized it. Now what I can do of this unutilized spectrum I can return it back to the government, which is unutilized for insufficient reasons, and also opens the door for sharing that spectrum with some other operators, trading it, leasing it. I can do all this. Earlier, this was not allowed. Entities will be able to surrender unused spectrum but will not receive payment from the government for it. Because it is not the government who is at fault for not utilizing the allocated spectrum. It is the operators who are at fault. Operators means the telecom operators like Jio or Vodafone Idea. These are telephone operators. Now, if they purchase the spectrum, they are not utilizing it, they have to return it back to the government. And the government is not going to pay them anything for returning that. Well, they have other options also. They can lease it out. They can share it with other, I would say, telecom operators. Then authentication of users. Entities have been mandated to carry out biometric authentication of their users as a measure to curb fraud. So now if you go to buy or purchase a SIM, the biometrics will be there. Fingerprint and all they used to take. They may take other biometrics like iris scan and also all these they can do. The provision has raised concerns about privacy of users. So it is like this. Then security provisions. Now, since one of the major objective of this bill was to ensure security or to strengthen security, because there were certain security concerns emanating out from this particular domain, that is telecommunications. Now, this bill empowers the government or the employee of the central and state governments or a specially authorized officer to seek interception, disclosure and suspension powers in case of public emergency or interest or safety. Now, government officials, in case of certain circumstances, they can intercept the communication of the users. Obviously, security concerns will be there, then only they will be doing it. Press messages meant for publication in India and of correspondents accredited to state or central governments have been exempted from interception. They will not be intercepted. Basically, the press messages, only those press messages which are being sent by government correspondents, government press house like ANI, or we have Press Trust of India, PTI, all these, or Doordarshan, those will not be intercepted, else others will be intercepted. It empowers the center to take over control and management of telecommunication services and networks in the interest of national security or in the event of a war. So during the time of war, all the telecommunication networks, irrespective of the fact run by the government or the private players, government can take control of all those. Like Jio, Vodafone, Airtel, all can be under government's control under such special circumstances. Like for example, we are in a state of war with any country. So the government can undertake those, I would say, telecommunications also. Now, chairperson of TRAI. TRAI is Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, the regulatory body which regulates this particular domain. The bill tabled in the parliament also lays down eligibility requirements for the chairperson of Telecom Regulatory Authority of India to be appointed from the private sector. Earlier, government officials, generally IAS officers, were there who were presiding over the TRAI. But yes, now members from the private sector can also be part of this. Now, definitely there are some issues with respect to the bill, and by now you may be able to sense also that what kind of issues are there. But yes, we will be dealing with it in detail. The bill provides that procedure and safeguards related to interception will be prescribed by the central government. The central government will have overarching powers. This may turn the government authoritarian. So that is something which is there. Interception means surveillance powers, excessive surveillance powers are there with the government. Then the bill may allow mass surveillance. Such measures may violate the fundamental right to privacy of the people. The bill does not specify procedural safeguards with respect to powers to search premises and the vehicles. So this is the requirement of biometric verification for users may not be proportionate and hence may infringe again on the right to privacy. Telecommunication services as defined under the bill may cover internet-based services. Internet-based services like WhatsApp, Telegram, etc. So communication over these internet based, I would say, chat boxes or internet based services, these are, they can also be under the ambit of this particular law according to the definition of telecommunications under this law. Now if this is the case, then obviously government is increasing its surveillance a lot, infringing upon a right to privacy. So let us see what the definition of telecommunications is. Transmission, emission or reception of any messages by wire, radio, optical or other electromagnetic systems. Wi-Fi, optical fiber, other electromagnetic systems. If we are using mobile data, that is through electromagnetic waves we are using it. Whether or not such messages have been subjected to rearrangement, computation or other processes by any means in the course of their transmission, emission or reception. Those will be called as, I would say, telecommunications. Messages also, they have been defined in this law. Messages has been further defined as any sign, signal, writing, text, image, sound, video, data stream, intelligence or information sent through telecommunication. So, by the government explicitly it has not been made clear कि भाई internet based services are covered or not. There are certain, I would say, think tanks which are interpreting this in such a way that they are not covered, the internet based services. But the definitions interpretation definitely points towards the fact that internet based services are covered. So let the government clear the air on it. If the government does not clear the air on it, then the judiciary should. But with time only, we will come to know that internet based services are covered in it or not. The bill vests several regulatory functions with the central government. This is distinct from the sectors such as power and finance, where these functions have been delegated to the regulators. So, regulator, that is TRAI in this case, some functions have been taken away from TRAI and made under the ambit of the government. So, this again is giving immense powers to the government and reducing the powers of regulators. This is something which is, I would say, uncalled for. The government may add, modify or remove offences in the third schedule to the bill by a notification, not by passing an amendment in the assembly. Just by notification, government can add any offence in the bill. So again, government's powers are immensely increasing by this bill. That is why this has become a lot of, I would say, or this bill has run into a lot of controversy. Since there were very less opposition members in the parliament to discuss and debate on this, it has been passed by the Lok Sabha. Let's see in what form and substance does it get passed in the Rajya Sabha. Now the second topic, causes of inflation in India. Inflation in India is caused due to the supply side or due to the demand side. Because one thing is clear, that inflation is caused due to supply-demand mismatch. Now, according to a RBI report which was published in December only, 55% of inflation in India is caused due to supply side. The rest 45 is caused due to demand side. Because increased demand causes inflation or reduced supply causes inflation. So it is the supply side which is responsible for majority part of inflation in India. So let us look into the details, and we will do this analysis from 2019 till 23. That is the last 4 years, and in these last 4 years, two major events we will see. That is first the COVID induced lockdowns, and the second is the Russia-Ukraine war. Because both of these events definitely had a huge impact on inflation and the entire economy, I would say. So, let us look into this. According to RBI, supply side effects accounts for about 55% of the CPI headline inflation. there are times when demand factor also plays a significant role. We cannot ignore it. Okay. Now, during the two waves of COVID-19, what happened? Supply disruptions were the main cause of inflation. Now, what happened when COVID came? Lockdowns were there. Initially, when lockdowns were there, so everything was closed, demand was suppressed, and so was manufacturing. Production was also suppressed. Overall economy went down. The prices of the commodities started to come down initially. But when the vaccination came into picture, the markets started opening up, the economy started opening up, then the demand side took over the supply side constraints. It was then the demand which was causing a lot of issues, because people were now out, they got vaccinated, and they were demanding the products. Now India has a very high savings rate also, because people had savings with them, and they many were working from home, especially the service sector employees, so they were getting salaries. Okay. So when the economy opened up, demand shot up, and that demand led to inflation. That is why it is written, two waves of COVID, supply disruptions were the main cause. However, following this Russia-Ukraine conflict, which happened after that, the driving forces shifted predominantly to factors related to demand. Initially, supply disruptions were there, due to which inflation was there. But after that, demand took over. Now, let's see what happened. What happened during COVID and Russia-Ukraine war? At the start of the pandemic, lockdowns caused a major decline in production and demand, leading to steep drop in economic growth. This phase also saw a decrease in commodity prices. This was the initial COVID due to weakened demand. However, as the economy began to reopen with distribution of vaccines and release of pent-up demand. Now, this term was used in this year's economic survey also. So we should understand what this pent-up demand is. It refers to a situation where demand for a service or product is unusually strong. It is generally used to describe the general public's return to increased spending following a period of decreased spending or recession. So this period, lockdowns was that period of decreased spending. But when the economy opened up, vaccinations and all were there into picture, then there were certain sectors where demand shot up and remained high. A classic example over here is the tourism sector. This particular sector was, I would say, one of the major beneficiaries of this pent-up demand, and this demand has remained high till date. So this technicality we need to understand, the release of pent-up demand, because this demand was suppressed due to COVID-induced lockdowns. Once those lockdowns were eased, demand shot up, it was released, and it remained high. Tourism. Demand recovered more rapidly than supply. This imbalance resulted in rising pressures on commodity prices. Then, next is the onset of Russia-Ukraine conflict in 2022. Intensified supply chain challenges. Now, particularly three commodities, I would say three essential commodities: fertilizer, food, and fuel. These three commodities, they were less in supply in the market. Fertilizer, why? Because natural gas came from Russia, which was there in the war, so it got disrupted. Food, Russia blockaded certain ports, 3-4 ports of Ukraine, from where wheat used to get supplied to the international market, because Ukraine is one of the biggest exporters of wheat. And fuel, again, due to this war, because Russia and all, they are one of the major suppliers of energy or oil to Europe, and Europe stopped taking oil from Russia and started demanding oil from West Asia. Now this sudden demand of oil increased the prices of oil. So this particular lack of supply of these essential commodities in the international market led to supply side constraints during this Russia-Ukraine war. So earlier, when COVID was there, lockdowns were induced. At that time, decrease in commodity prices happened because everything was shut down. But as when the market started to open up, there was this release of pent up demand. Due to that demand, inflation happened, prices rose. And then came the Russia-Ukraine war. Then supply was cut off of major or essential commodities. At that time, due to supply side constraints, inflation happened. In India, largely if I talk about the last 4 years, 2019 till 2023, inflation happened 55% due to supply side constraints. So let us look into more detail about it, because this is something, this and the next slide is something or somewhere UPSC can ask questions in prelims also. So be very careful while understanding this. When there is an unforeseen shift in both prices and quantities, we are studying about demand side inflation. How we can assess that inflation is happening due to demand side. Okay. Now, when there is an unforeseen shift in both prices and quantities, quantities means production. Okay. Within a month that aligns in the same direction, means prices are also going up or quantity is also going up. This is happening in the same direction. This approach categorizes inflation for that month as being driven by demand. Now, when prices of any commodity, let's suppose I'm talking about rice. The prices of the rice are also rising and the production of rice is also rising. This situation will happen when, there will be increased demand for rice. Now, let's suppose I am a rice mill owner. There is a lot of demand of rice in the market. Whatever I am making, it is getting consumed by the members of the common public immediately, and there is more demand. So what I'll do, I'll produce more, and next batch, what I'll do, I'll increase the prices because I know that there is demand. People will consume. So inflation happens because I'm increasing the prices. So this is inflation driven by demand. This means that increase in demand leads to a rise in both prices and quantities. It is that due to that increased demand in the market, why I increased my productivity, why I increased the quantity of rice in the market, and I also increased the prices along with it, because I know that there is demand, people will consume, people will buy. While a decrease in demand results in reduction in both. Now, if the demand is decreased, then quantity which I will be producing will also reduce and the prices will also reduce. So demand is basically the driver of inflation over here in this case. So it is like this. If demand reduces, quantity will reduce, price will also reduce. So both are going in the same direction. Price increase, quantity increase if demand is high. If demand is less, price will decrease, quantity will decrease. That is what it is saying, that when there is an unforeseen shift in both prices and quantities within a month that aligns in the same direction. Same direction is prices increasing, quantity increasing, prices decreasing, quantity decreasing. Like this. Then how do I assess that inflation is due to supply side? Now, inflation is considered to be supply driven if there is unexpected change in prices and quantities that move in opposite direction. Now, in this scenario, prices and quantity will move in opposite direction. Now, let's suppose Russia-Ukraine war, the inflation at that time was due to supply side constraints. Now, Let's suppose if I talk about a commodity like fertilizer. The supply of fertilizer reduced and prices went up because, this is something which is a basic commodity. Then what we will say, that inflation has happened due to lack of supply of fertilizers. Demand is there, but due to reduced supply, people are ready to shelf off or to pay more for that fertilizer. So it is like this. If supply increases, means quantity increases of fertilizer, then obviously prices will fall down. This happens when both are not in the same direction, and in this case the inflation is driven by, or the inflation is supply driven. And majority of inflation which happens in India, 55% of, I would say, the contributing factor for inflation in India is supply driven inflation. It is there. Okay? Or supply side constraints, it causes inflation in India. Now there is this figure also which was there in I would say the newspaper today. Now this figure, the light blue lines which you are seeing are supply factors causing inflation, and the dark blue ones which you are seeing, this one, are the demand factors that are causing inflation, and the gray ones are ambiguous factors, means unknown they are. Now only in a selected few, I would say items like non-alcoholic beverages, personal care products and health related goods, these three goods, 1, 2 and 3, you can see the dark blue line above the light blue line. Apart from these three products, you will see the light blue line above the dark blue line, means due to supply side factors, inflation is there in these kind of, or these products. As simple as that. So this is there. Majority of the products in India are getting inflated or are getting I would say expensive due to supply side constraints. Then if I see a month on month analysis of total inflation in India, again here the light blue is supply factors, the dark blue is demand factors, and the gray ones are ambiguous factors. So the light ones you will see dominating over here as well. So this is what the story of inflation in India has been, and that is why, rightly according to that report of RBI, 55% of inflation in India happens to supply side constraints. The technicalities need to be understood. In mains also, UPSC can frame a question from here. Discuss the major reasons of inflation in India. So if I see this question may seem very simple, but yes, if you give this kind of analysis in that question, definitely you're bound to get more marks. So this needs to be understood in this way. And this is it from today's session. I will be meeting you tomorrow now with more such informative news pieces. Till then, you guys very well know what to do. Keep studying, keep reading, keep writing, and most importantly, keep revising. Namaste. Jai Hind.